Welcome to the third episode of How to Be an Effective Advocate for DCTA. This is your host, Shaq here, the Congressional Affairs Coordinator and Training Lead for this session. Let's talk about the legislative process. So what is government? We have a few systems in place for government, right? We have a representative government, which is a republic of democratically elected officials that you as constituents, as voters, could decide on who gets to run certain offices and represent jurisdictions. Greece was a direct democracy, but not a republic. It was a pretty small state with limited voting rights compared to what we have in most of the world, but it was a place where people, everyone who had a vote, could decide on policies without having representatives. Everyone was equal in their voting power. Today, we see that in our elections, from school board to state offices to the national level in certain elections. Republic. Fun fact. Republic comes from the word res publica. It's Latin for the people's business, and it's important to note that it's a state where supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives. Presidents are elected or nominated rather than appointed by divine right like you'd see in a monarchy. In our system, the elected representatives lead offices responsible for administering much of the functions that you see in branches of government. These include the executive branch, the legislative branch, as well as the judicial branch. Next, we'll talk about state sunshine laws. You have a right to know. Open government requires a bit of transparency to be really helpful for the people. These sunshine laws are regulations that require things like public disclosure of government agency meetings, most hearings, and business records in order to ensure transparency. Every state has some sort of sunshine law. You can easily find yours by Googling open meeting law and maybe your state, let's say California. In California, they have the CPRA, the California Public Records Act, and these can simply be submitted by emailing an administrator or filling out a form on their website and maybe citing the CPRA. They're legally bound to respond within 10 days with your records, or maybe ask for a 14-day extension in case you're asking for a substantial amount. But if they're not responsive, let's say they're not communicating with you, within the timeline, you can file a lawsuit with that agency. Focusing more in California, let's talk about the life cycle of legislation with the California legislature. So this is a general overview, a very loud diagram, and applies to most states. Basically, laws first start off as ideas. These come from legislators or from passionate citizens. A bill is drafted by a member of the legislature, either from the assembly or Senate side, and they'll author a bill with their own language, their own ideas, and send it to the legislative council's office to be drafted into a bill. Once in the pipeline, the bill is introduced in the House, came from for the first reading, then it goes back to the member for review and is introduced at either the state or assembly desk. After this, the bill is sent to the Rules Committee, then to a Policy Committee, and ultimately the bill can be assigned to 1 to 3 committees and it receives a hearing. But this is just a brief overview of the process using California example. That's it for today's session, and thank you for joining.